ever feel like you're stuck between two worlds, too old to be a dreamer, too young to just fade out quietly, like the world expects you to settle, while something inside you is screaming for more? Let me tell you something. You're not done. In fact, you're just getting started. This isn't the end of the road. It's the start of your second act. And this time you're playing for legacy. Let's destroy the lies. Let's reignite the fire. Let's talk about what it means to be too old to dream, too young to quit. Step #1. Age is a limiting belief, not a limitation. Age is a concept we've been conditioned to interpret as a stop sign. From the time we're young, society plants seeds in our minds. Achieve this by 30. Have it all figured out by 40. Slow down by 50. These timelines become invisible chains. The moment we pass one of those invisible milestones, we start shrinking. Not because our body forces us to, but because our belief system does. The truth is, age has no actual power. It doesn't stop your ability to learn, grow, create, or reinvent. But what does the story you attach to it? When someone says, "I'm too old to start over," what they're really saying is, "I've accepted a belief that tells me possibility has an expiration date." And beliefs like that aren't truths, they're mental habits. Repeated thoughts hardened into certainty. Think about it. Two people can be the same age. One is just getting started on a new mission, while the other is calling it quits. The difference isn't the number, it's the narrative. One sees age as an asset, the other sees it as a weight. That gap is entirely internal. The problem is, we often confuse physical change with personal limitation. Yes, the body changes. Yes, life demands more resilience with time. But the human spirit doesn't age. Passion doesn't expire. The ability to dream, to grow, to adapt, to shift, that's not locked to a decade or a digit. What really holds people back is the belief that the best years are behind them. That because they didn't achieve something by a certain point, the window is now closed. But that's not age speaking, that's fear in disguise, fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of not measuring up to someone else's timeline. And here's the twist. Most people aren't limited by their age. They're limited by their refusal to challenge the beliefs they've outgrown. They've built an identity around being past their prime without ever asking, who told me that, and were they even right? Because when you strip away the cultural noise, the external voices, the social media timelines, what's left is a simple truth. Your life is measured in energy, not years. Your future is measured by vision, not age. Step #2. The dream evolves, but it never dies. Dreams are often born in youth, fueled by passion, raw energy, and a sense of infinite possibility. In that phase, the dream feels pure, bold, even a little reckless. It's untouched by the world's resistance. But as life unfolds, as responsibilities pile on, and disappointments accumulate, that once fiery dream can begin to fade, not because it's no longer relevant, but because it's been buried under layers of survival, routine, and fear. People mistake that fading glow for death. They think that dream must not be for me anymore, simply because it no longer looks the way it did at the beginning. But a dream isn't static. It's a living, breathing vision that adapts to who you become. It matures as you do. What once started as a goal to be rich, famous, or free might evolve into a mission to create meaning, impact others, or find inner peace. The core desire, freedom, purpose, fulfillment, remains intact. What changes is the expression. This is where most people get lost. They cling to the form instead of the function. They think, "I didn't become a rock star, so I failed." But maybe the deeper calling wasn't to be on stage. It was to express, to lead, to inspire. And those things can manifest in 1,000 ways at any point in life. The dream didn't die. It shifted. It asked you to grow with it, not give up on it. There's also a tendency to grieve the loss of the old dream without recognizing that it was just one chapter of a longer story. Life isn't a straight line, it's a spiral. The dream you had at 25 isn't supposed to look the same at 45 or 65. With age comes clarity, with struggle comes depth, and with failure comes refinement. That refined version of the dream might be quieter, but it's also stronger. More rooted, less about proving, more about being. What throws people off is the silence between versions, the gap, that moment where the original dream no longer fits and the new one hasn't fully formed. That liminal space is uncomfortable. It feels like loss, like confusion, like drifting, but it's actually the ground where transformation begins. It's not the end, it's the recalibration, and in that space the soul whispers, there's more. A dream doesn't require youthful energy, it requires belief. It doesn't ask for permission, it asks for commitment, and when you realize that the dream has simply evolved, that it's still alive, just in a different shape, you begin to understand that what you've been searching for was never lost. It's just been waiting for you to catch up. Step #3. Momentum doesn't care about age. Momentum is a force that doesn't check your birth certificate before showing up. It doesn't care if you're 20 or 60, if you're just starting out or starting over. Momentum responds to movement, not age. The moment you take a step, no matter how small, you activate something real. You stir the waters, you shift your energy, and life begins to move with you. Most people assume that momentum is only available to the young, those with more time, more energy, more opportunity. But momentum isn't biased. It doesn't ask where you've been. It responds to where you're willing to go. You could be stuck for a decade, paralyzed by fear or indecision, but the second you choose action over hesitation, things begin to shift. Doors open, ideas flood in, people show up. Why? Because momentum is built by motion, not by age brackets or timelines. There's this myth that the later you start, the harder it is. And while it's true that you may face more resistance, internally or externally, it's also true that you have more leverage, more clarity, more emotional muscle. You're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience. That means when you finally do move, your steps are deliberate. You're not wasting time wandering in circles. You're building on years of lessons, some painful, some powerful, and turning them into precision. That's when momentum really kicks in. The problem is, many people wait for momentum to find them. They sit in the waiting room of life, hoping motivation will appear, but it doesn't work that way. Motivation is a spark. Momentum is the fire, and fire requires fuel. It needs you to move first, to lean in, to decide, because once you do, momentum accelerates results in a way that age alone never could. It compounds effort. It rewards consistency, and it gives back tenfold whatever you put in. What people forget is that momentum builds confidence, confidence builds courage, and courage sustains momentum. That cycle has nothing to do with how many birthdays you've had. It has everything to do with how willing you are to push past inertia. Inertia is the killer. It's that heavy fog that convinces you to stay still, play safe, hold back. But momentum shatters inertia, and it doesn't require a perfect plan, a flawless start, or a massive breakthrough. All it requires is one bold step followed by another. Even the smallest action, when repeated, creates a rhythm. That rhythm becomes a force, and once it's in motion, age becomes irrelevant. Momentum doesn't need permission, it just needs a direction and a decision. Step #4. Regret is louder than fear. Fear is loud in the beginning. It shouts in your mind when you're about to take a risk, when you consider changing direction, when you start dreaming again after being stuck for years. It tells you all the reasons why something might not work. It paints pictures of failure, embarrassment, rejection. Fear is immediate. It shows up like a storm warning, trying to keep you safe, comfortable, small. But here's what most people miss. Fear fades. It loses its grip once you move. The moment you take that first uncomfortable step, fear starts to weaken. You realize the monster in your mind wasn't nearly as dangerous as it felt. Action quiets fear. Progress overpowers it, and eventually it becomes background noise. But regret is quiet at first. It whispers in the spaces between your distractions. It hides under your routines. It doesn't scream, it waits. It's patient because regret knows its voice gets louder over time. It doesn't need to rush. It grows with inaction. You may ignore it for years, pushing your dreams to the side, convincing yourself that it's not the right time, that you're not ready, that you'll try again later. But later turns into never, and that's when regret starts speaking louder than any fear ever could. It speaks when you see someone else doing what you once wanted to do. It speaks when the opportunity that once knocked isn't knocking anymore. It speaks when the mirror reflects not just your age, but your avoidance. Regret doesn't care about excuses. It doesn't soothe you with logic or comfort you with justification. It reminds you of the chances you didn't take, the words you never said, the work you never finished. And it has a sting that fear could never match, because fear is based on what might go wrong. Regret is built on what actually never happened. And here's the thing, most of what we fear doesn't even materialize. The failures we imagine rarely play out the way we predict, but regret is real, tangible. It builds like weight in the soul, accumulating over years of hesitation and missed windows. It lives in the silence of what could have been. It echoes in the words, "what if," over and over again. That's the trade most people unconsciously make. They choose short-term comfort to avoid fear, not realizing they're making a long-term deposit into the account of regret. It's a slow burn, a quiet erosion of passion and purpose, and once it takes hold, it's not easy to shake. Fear has an end point. You can break through it. You can rise above it. But regret stays unless you rewrite the story. It becomes the background music of a life unlived, growing louder each time you pass another year, another dream, another chance, and say, maybe next time. Step #5. Your experience is your edge. Experience is often dismissed as baggage when it should be recognized as your greatest competitive advantage. It's the edge that separates you from someone just starting out, not because you've avoided mistakes, but because you've made them, learned from them, and survived them. Every setback you've endured, every hard lesson life forced you to learn, every time you were knocked down and chose to get back up. That's currency, that's leverage, that's wisdom earned in the trenches. In a world obsessed with speed, novelty, and the latest trends, it's easy to forget that depth matters, and depth comes from experience. You've seen more, felt more, lost more, rebuilt more. You understand the nuances. You don't just have information. You have perspective. You know how to read between the lines. You've developed intuition, pattern recognition, emotional intelligence. Those aren't things you can download. They're forged through time. People often compare themselves to younger versions of success. The startup founder in their 20s, the viral sensation fresh out of school, the influencer who seems to have it all figured out. But what those stories don't show is what happens when pressure builds, when challenges hit, when the surface cracks. That's where experience takes over. That's where you thrive, because you've already been through the fire. You've built resilience that can't be faked, and it's not just about surviving. It's about translating that survival into strength. Experience gives you clarity on what actually matters. You stop chasing every shiny object. You stop seeking approval from people who aren't even walking your path. You become more intentional, more strategic. You know how to pace yourself. You know when to push and when to pivot. That level of awareness is priceless. There's also a confidence that comes from experience, not arrogance, but grounded certainty. It's not loud, it doesn't need to shout. It comes from knowing that you've handled things before and you can handle them again. It's a quiet power. It's not driven by ego. It's driven by truth. You've got receipts. You've earned your stripes. You don't need to fake anything. And here's the part most people don't see. Your experience doesn't just help you. It helps others. You become a source of wisdom, a mentor, a guide. You can shorten someone else's learning curve. You can speak with authority because you're not theorizing. You're speaking from lived reality. That makes you irreplaceable. Experience is your edge because it gives you access to tools no one else can replicate exactly the same way. Your life, your struggles, your unique path, they've shaped you into someone with a lens no one else has. You see things differently, you respond differently, you lead differently, and that difference, that's your advantage, that's your edge. Step #6. You're in the sweet spot, old enough to know. Young enough to grow, there's a powerful place in life where most people don't even realize they're standing. A crossroads that feels confusing, maybe even frustrating, but is actually packed with potential. It's that space where you're not quite young, in the traditional sense anymore, but you're far from done. You've seen enough to understand how the world really works, how people operate, and how success is built, not by luck or hype, but by commitment, strategy, and resilience. And at the same time, you still have enough energy, time, and capacity to evolve, shift direction, and grow into something entirely new. You're in the sweet spot, the middle zone where wisdom and possibility overlap. You've made enough mistakes to know what not to do again, and you've had enough wins to know what's worth chasing. You've outgrown the need to prove yourself to everyone, but you still carry the hunger to become your best self. That's a rare place to be, because when you're young, you have raw drive, but not always direction. When you're older, you have clarity, but not always the fire. But when you're in this middle ground, when you're old enough to know better and young enough to still go after it, that's where transformation lives. You've likely faced some disappointments already. Things didn't go as planned, dreams changed, people came and went, that's part of the process, but through all of that, you've developed a kind of emotional intelligence that can't be taught in a classroom or downloaded from a podcast. You know what matters now. You've sharpened your ability to focus, to cut through the noise, to listen to your own voice above the chaos. That awareness is power, and combined with the fact that your story is still unfolding. That's dynamite. This is the chapter where reinvention becomes possible, not from a place of desperation, but from a place of alignment. You're not starting from scratch. You're starting from experience, from knowledge, from a foundation built over years of living, trying, learning, failing, adapting. That foundation gives you the stability to take bigger, smarter risks, to build something deeper, not just louder, to stretch beyond your current comfort zone, not because you have to, but because you can. And while you may not have the same energy you had at 20, what you do have now is intention. You don't waste time the way you used to. You don't chase approval the way you once did. You've developed a radar for what's real and what's noise, that ability to prioritize, to choose what truly matters and block out what doesn't. That's part of what makes this your prime time. You're not reacting to life anymore. You're ready to design it deliberately, powerfully, unapologetically, because you finally get that life isn't about being the fastest or the first. It's about being authentic and bold enough to still chase growth even when others start settling. So here's the truth. You're not too old to dream, and you're definitely too young to quit. You are standing in a season of life where your scars have become your strength. Your setbacks have sharpened your focus, and your story isn't over, it's just getting richer. The world doesn't need perfection from you. It needs your fire, it needs your vision, it needs your wisdom in motion. Stop letting numbers define what's possible. Stop waiting for a perfect time that will never exist. Start now with what you've got where you are, because this version of you battle-tested, self-aware, still hungry, is the most powerful one yet. The dream is still alive. The momentum is still yours to build. The story is still unfolding, and the best part, you're the one holding the pen.